For decades, Marta Kristen smiled when people asked about her time on the iconic set of Lost in Space. She spoke warmly about lasting friendship, deepest gratitude, and how incredibly lucky she felt to be part of such a groundbreaking television phenomenon. But behind those polite, well-rehearsed answers, there were moments she kept entirely to herself for a long time. These were the quiet, difficult moments that shaped her far more than the television scripts ever could. Now, at 80 years old, she is finally choosing to speak with a completely different kind of raw honesty. What she confirms about that chaotic studio set changes how we perceive the young girl who brought Judy Robinson to life. It is a story of internal conflict, shifting creative priorities, and personal resilience. To truly understand her experience, one must look far beyond the bright lights of Hollywood sound stages. Her journey did not begin in a talent agency or a glamorous screen test, but rather in the deep, terrifying shadows of a war-torn European landscape. The contrast between her early survival and her later television fame is utterly staggering. By examining this hidden history, we gain a profound appreciation for the woman behind the science fiction icon. Long before the dazzling lights of a major studio sound stage ever touched her face, Marta Kristen's life had already been drastically shaped by historical forces far larger than Hollywood. She entered the world in Oslo, Norway, during a dark time when absolute fear dictated daily survival for everyone. Her biological mother, a young Finnish woman caught hopelessly in the cruel machinery of World War II, became romantically involved with a German soldier who would not live to see his daughter grow up. By the time Marta was born, the entire European continent was rapidly unraveling into total chaos. Political allegiances were incredibly dangerous, and wartime identities were even more perilous for innocent civilians. Her mother understood the immediate, terrifying risks associated with the baby's heritage. A child born under those specific, volatile circumstances could easily be pulled into the notorious Nazi Lebensborn program, a chilling state system built around strict racial ideology. To prevent that horrific fate from happening, she made a desperate, heartbreaking choice that altered history. The vulnerable baby was quietly and secretly placed into an underground orphanage system. There were no joyous family celebrations, no precious photographs, and no official public birth announcements made. In that hidden world, there was only the absolute necessity of concealment and silence. Marta would later learn that her earliest months of life were defined not by soothing lullabies, but by constant caution and secrecy. She did not grow up knowing exactly who she was or where she truly belonged. Instead, she grew up instinctively learning the basic mechanisms of human survival in a hostile environment. When a kind-hearted American couple from Detroit eventually adopted her, everything in her world shifted dramatically. But this profound transformation did not happen all at once for the young, traumatized child. Professor Harold Soderquist and his loving wife offered her incredible stability, academic structure, and a completely new name to carry forward. They gave her genuine warmth, an excellent education, and something she had never truly experienced before in her short life, which was absolute safety. Yet even as a very small child growing up in comfort, Marta carried a quiet internal awareness that she had been deeply uprooted from her original home. She vaguely remembered constant movement, sudden change, and the persistent, haunting feeling of not quite belonging anywhere she went. Her new adoptive parents actively encouraged creative expression. The Soderquists were disciplined teachers, but they possessed highly imaginative minds and appreciated the arts deeply. When the family eventually relocated to sunny California, the creative world opened up much wider for the growing girl. Enrolling in Santa Monica High School placed her directly near an expanding entertainment industry entirely built on personal reinvention and storytelling. Her mother would later fondly recall that when they first met her at the busy airport in New York years earlier, the little girl walked off the plane with an exaggerated theatrical confidence, flawlessly mimicking Charlie Chaplin without even realizing what she was doing. Even then, at such a tender age, she was constantly performing for the world around her. This performance was not done for cheap applause, but rather as a desperate psychological mechanism for human connection. Incredible professional opportunity found her completely unexpectedly one afternoon. A prominent Hollywood film producer noticed her sitting in a local restaurant and immediately saw something utterly magnetic in her presence. An attractive film offer came quickly, but her protective parents firmly declined, remaining cautious about the industry. Still, that chance encounter quickly led to professional representation. Soon, Marta began regularly appearing in popular television dramas and wholesome family films of the era. She was no longer the hidden, frightened child hiding in wartime Norway. Instead, she was an ambitious young actress reporting to massive studio gates before dawn, watching the golden sun rise beautifully over the historic 20th Century Fox lot. Each morning, that driving commute to the studio lot felt completely unreal to her. She would sit quietly in her car and think deeply about the dark orphanage hidden beneath the streets of Oslo, and about the brave woman who had hidden her away just to keep her alive. Now, by some twist of fate, she was walking into brightly lit makeup trailers, warmly greeted by professional crew members who knew her by name. The sheer contrast between those two worlds was absolutely overwhelming to her young mind. She never felt entitled to this immense creative success. Rather, she felt utterly astonished by it every single day. That persistent sense of disbelief, the reality that she had traveled from total secrecy to the Hollywood spotlight, followed her directly into the competitive audition room for a new science fiction series. The show was an ambitious project about an American family completely lost in the uncharted depths of outer space. She could not have possibly known then that the specific role waiting behind that studio door would permanently bind her to millions of dedicated viewers for the rest of her life. Ironically, it was a career-defining role that she almost completely refused to take. When the visionary creator Irwin Allen explicitly singled her out for the pivotal role of Judy Robinson, it really should have felt like a straightforward, monumental victory for her career. Marta Kristen was young, working steadily in the industry, and already building an excellent reputation in the competitive world of television. Being personally chosen for a major studio television series was exactly the kind of rare opportunity that aspiring actresses waited many agonizing years to achieve. But instead of celebrating this massive career milestone immediately, she took a deliberate step back to reflect. For nearly 2 long weeks, she did absolutely nothing but think deeply about the long-term implications of the choice. At that specific time in her creative life, she was deeply drawn to the artistic world of live theater. She had grown up reading the works of William Shakespeare for pure pleasure, completely fascinated by the unique rhythm, emotional weight, and artistic power of classical language. She vividly imagined herself moving to New York City, studying the craft seriously with legendary teachers, earning challenging roles on the stage, and proving to critics that she was far more than just a pretty face on a television soundstage. To her young mind, theater represented ultimate artistic discipline and intellectual depth. Television, by contrast, felt highly uncertain and temporary, especially the genre of science fiction. In the mid-1960s, science fiction was not yet respected as a serious or legitimate artistic platform for serious dramatic actors. She worried constantly that stepping into a whimsical space adventure might permanently lock her into something incredibly lightweight, an artistic prison she would struggle to outgrow for the rest of her career. The heavy pressure from those around her only intensified the agonizing decision-making process. Trusted friends in industry, colleagues told her bluntly that turning down such a major network role would be completely foolish. This was definitely not a minor guest appearance on a fatting show. It was a primetime network production with immense creative ambition, massive scale, and heavy financial investment from the studio. It possessed the undeniable potential to make her an instantly recognizable household name overnight across the country. Some mentors reminded her how remarkably few actors ever receive a direct career offer that arrives with the creator himself already insisting, "That is the one." Irwin Allen's absolute confidence in her talent carried massive weight in Hollywood. He did not want a long lineup of desperate actresses competing fiercely for the part during endless network callbacks. He wanted Marta Kristen and no one else to embody Judy Robinson. That kind of direct, unyielding certainty unsettled her in a very profound and different way. She felt the heavy artistic responsibility of it weighing on her shoulders. If she officially said yes to the project, she would not just be joining a television show, she would be actively representing someone's deeply personal creative vision. In the end, pure creative instinct completely overruled her intense hesitation. She chose to trust that the unique experience might open unexpected professional doors she could not yet see. When she finally stepped onto the elaborate set for the very first time, there was a quiet internal recognition that her life had fundamentally shifted once again. The fictional Robinson family was at the absolute center of a highly ambitious narrative regarding human survival in the cold isolation of deep space. The early scripts carried genuine emotional weight and dramatic tension. The complex family dynamic mattered deeply to the writers and the directors involved in the production. The overall tone of the show was thoughtful, serious, and deeply grounded, especially during the crucial beginning of the first season. It was definitely not a parody, and it was certainly not campy entertainment. It was a serious story about human resilience under completely impossible, terrifying environmental conditions. For Marta, that central theme of survival struck something deeply personal within her soul. She understood the pain of displacement perfectly. She understood the immense challenge of rebuilding one's identity in completely unfamiliar territory. Judy Robinson was written as a brave young woman navigating immense cosmic uncertainty while trying desperately to remain emotionally steady for those around her. In many distinct ways, Marta felt she could easily draw from her own traumatic life experiences without forcing the performance at all. The promising first season gave her immense hope that the series would eventually grow into something deeply layered, philosophical, and meaningful. She creatively imagined Judy Robinson evolving over time, becoming more intellectually curious, and perhaps even reflecting the massive cultural shifts and feminist awakenings currently unfolding across America. She genuinely believed there was ample room within the science fiction framework to deepen the character's internal life. However, what she confirms now with the absolute clarity that only many passing decades can bring is that the television series slowly but surely moved in a completely different creative direction. The show she had enthusiastically agreed to join, one firmly grounded in family drama and realistic survival, began to rapidly shift its entire center of gravity. And that unexpected creative shift would ultimately test her professional resolve and personal patience far more than any grueling studio audition ever had in her past. When the overarching story fundamentally shifted, the complete transformation of Lost in Space was gradual enough that absolutely no one on set could point to a single day and say, "This is exactly where everything changed." During the successful first season, the close-knit Robinson family had remained the undeniable emotional anchor of every single script. The episodes regularly carried genuine dramatic tension, and the daily struggle for physical survival felt incredibly urgent to the audience. The creative tone leaned heavily toward the serious, sometimes even bordering on the somber and existential. There was a palpable sense that the network was trying hard to balance cutting-edge science fiction concepts with genuine family drama. Then, something subtle and powerful began to shift within the show's dynamic. Television viewers responded with immense enthusiasm and intensity to Jonathan Harris's brilliant portrayal of the villainous Dr. Zachary Smith. What had originally started as a sinister, scheming antagonist slowly evolved into something far more colorful, theatrical, and unpredictable. Harris possessed absolutely impeccable comedic timing and a grand, theatrical instinct that was completely impossible for the directors to ignore. His wonderfully exaggerated expressions, dramatic physical flourishes, and carefully sharpened dialogue made him completely magnetic to watch on screen. When perfectly paired with the iconic robot and young Will Robinson, played by Bill Mumy, the creative dynamic sparked absolute magic. Audiences laughed hysterically at their antics, and passionate fan letters poured into the studio by the thousands every week. Network executives immediately took notice of this massive ratings shift. The show's writers naturally began to lean heavily into what was clearly working in the ratings. By the time the second season entered production, more and more episodes revolved entirely around Dr. Smith's ridiculous misadventures, elaborate schemes that inevitably backfired, comedic threats that quickly dissolved into sheer absurdity, and witty exchanges with the robot that became instantly quotable. The humor became broad, colorful, and accessible to very young children. From a cold production standpoint, this creative shift was incredibly efficient for the studio. Writing broad comedy required far less technical realism and expensive special effects. It allowed scripts to be generated at a much faster pace by the writing staff. Most importantly for the network, it kept younger viewers intensely engaged and glued to the screen. Marta Kristen fully understood the cold business logic behind these television industry decisions. She has never once denied that Jonathan Harris was an extraordinarily talented and dedicated actor. In fact, she has openly and generously acknowledged over the years that Harris often completely reworked his own dialogue, instinctively shaping Dr. Smith into a lovable villain with immense charm rather than genuine malice. If he had remained a cold, calculating antagonist, the character might not have survived the show's evolution. Instead, he successfully became the undisputed center of gravity for the entire series. But understanding something intellectually does not erase the deep professional cost an actor pays. As the seasons progressed, Marta began receiving new scripts where Judy Robinson's dramatic role had shrunk rather drastically. Scenes that once allowed for complex, layered emotional reactions became brief, superficial appearances. Entire episodes would pass by with Judy contributing very little to the plot beyond supportive, background dialogue. The early artistic hope of exploring her character's deep intelligence, and perhaps even incorporating the rich literary interests that Marta herself deeply cherished, completely faded away. She had once fondly imagined Judy quoting classical Shakespeare, or confronting extraterrestrial danger with sheer intellect rather than simply standing passively beside the male characters. Outside the walls of the studio, the entire country was changing rapidly during the late 1960s. The traditional American image of the dutiful, silent, and purely decorative housewife was being fiercely questioned by society. Women were entering entirely new national conversations about personal identity, career ambition, and social independence. Marta genuinely believed there was an incredible opportunity for Judy Robinson to reflect that historic cultural shift in subtle, empowering ways. Instead, the character remained largely frozen in time, even as the series leaned further into wild fantasy, colorful monsters, and pure television spectacle. There was no dramatic confrontation on set and no explosive rebellion from Marta. She did not storm off the studio set in a rage. She chose to stay completely professional through it all. She showed up on time every day, meticulously learned her lines, and deeply respected the hardworking crew members. These were essential professional lessons regularly reinforced by Jonathan Harris himself. Yet privately within her own artistic soul, she felt the painful narrowing of her creative world. By the arrival of the third season, the series was no longer primarily about an American family navigating intense isolation in the cosmos. It had completely transformed into something much lighter, more exaggerated, and entirely driven by comic chaos. The robot and Dr. Smith completely dominated almost all of the major storylines. The delicate narrative balance had permanently tipped. Marta explicitly confirms now that her deep professional disappointment was very real, even if it was rarely visible to the public or the press at the time. She did not harbor any resentment toward her talented castmates, nor did she resent the show's massive commercial success. What she deeply mourned was the sophisticated version of the show she genuinely thought they were building together. And still, despite the quiet frustration, she stayed with the production, carrying that internal disappointment without ever letting it fracture the genuine, loving family they had carefully formed behind the scenes. As the television scripts gradually narrowed her artistic opportunities, something else beautiful deepened in ways that ordinary viewers could never witness on their screens. Marta often explicitly states that what truly sustained her during those frustrating seasons was not the quality of the writing, but the incredible people around her. The bustling studio set slowly became a genuine second home to her. This did not happen in an overly sentimental or artificial sense, but rather in the unique way that incredibly long, exhausting production days can quietly bind complete strangers together into a tight unit. Guy Williams carried himself with a calm, aristocratic dignity that completely anchored the younger, less experienced cast members. He possessed a rich background in classical music and an old-world gentlemanly manner about him that commanded natural respect. Classical compositions regularly drifted from his private dressing room, creating a wonderful pocket of absolute stillness amid the chaotic madness of television production. To Marta, his presence felt incredibly steady, reassuring, and almost paternal in nature. He was someone who took the immense responsibility of portraying Professor John Robinson very seriously, even when the scripts became silly. His dignified presence constantly reminded her that even in a television series increasingly driven by absurd spectacle, there was still a core of absolute sincerity at its heart. June Lockhart was a completely different kind of woman, but she was equally influential in shaping Marta's life. Highly intelligent, remarkably composed, and endlessly professional under pressure, June quietly mentored Marta without ever grandly announcing that she was doing so. She generously taught the younger actress how to navigate complex studio politics gracefully, and how to firmly protect her own interests without ever becoming overly defensive or difficult to work with. There were many small, comforting rituals established between them over the years. They shared deep conversations in the makeup chairs and exchanged quiet words of encouragement before filming difficult scenes. These moments never made the supermarket tabloids, but they deeply shaped Marta's growing confidence as a young woman. Jonathan Harris, despite his flamboyant, self-absorbed on-screen persona, fiercely insisted on absolute workplace discipline from everyone. He firmly believed that the ancient craft of acting required immense respect and dedication. Showing up even a few minutes late to the set was considered completely unacceptable in his eyes. Wasting a hardworking crew member's valuable time was a definitive sign of artistic carelessness that he would not tolerate. Marta has explicitly stated that while she already understood those basic principles from her upbringing, watching a veteran actor like Harris embody them daily deeply reinforced her own professional standards. His sharp humor could be incredibly biting, and sometimes even wildly off-color, but it was always delivered with absolute precision and immense intelligence. Many years later, when she saw him again near the very end of his long life, the physical energy between them was remarkably different. He leaned on her physically, far more frail than she had ever remembered him being. After she successfully completed a commercial project, he wrapped his aging arms around her and praised her work. That unexpected display of pure tenderness deeply surprised her. That loving embrace ultimately became one of her most treasured personal memories after he peacefully passed away. With Bill Mumy and Angela Cartwright, the deep emotional connection felt far more like real-life siblings than mere Hollywood colleagues. Marta enthusiastically introduced a young Bill Mumy to the revolutionary music of Bob Dylan, and the two of them would passionately sing folk songs together between lighting takes on the set. Angela's genuine warmth and kindness never once wavered throughout the entire run of the series. She remained one of the most constant, reliable, and deeply cherished friendships in Marta's life for decades to come. Mark Goddard brought a sharp, sarcastic humor to the set that could instantly cut through the immense physical tension of a long filming day. Still, this intense closeness inevitably had its own psychological cost. Working side by side for several years under stressful conditions naturally created moments of friction. There were inevitable disagreements over creative direction, over story emphasis, and over sheer physical fatigue. Heated arguments definitely happened behind closed doors, though they were very rarely allowed to occur in front of the cameras or the crew. No television production that intense runs for years without experiencing deep interpersonal strain. But what ultimately stunned Marta the most about her time on the show was not the occasional workplace conflict. Rather, it was the abrupt, total silence that would suddenly follow when everything officially ended. It was a profound, eerie silence that absolutely no one in Hollywood had prepared her to face. There was no grand, emotional farewell episode filmed, and no final, beautifully written script designed to properly close the Robinson family's epic interstellar journey. Marta was simply sitting at home on an ordinary day when she received the shocking phone call. The hit series had been abruptly canceled by the network. She was left completely speechless by the news. The show's ratings were still remarkably strong, and the national fan base was incredibly loyal. But the production had become exceedingly expensive to maintain due to elaborate sets and special effects. Behind the scenes, serious executive tensions had grown between creator Irwin Allen and the network bosses. The network had reportedly demanded multiple completed scripts in advance. Allen was juggling too many massive television projects at once and simply did not meet those strict corporate expectations. Rather than escalate the political fight, the network chose to cancel the show entirely. For Marta, the single hardest part of the experience was the complete lack of narrative closure. After spending years carefully building a complex fictional family, everything stopped instantly in a single phone conversation. The profound sense of ensemble that she had grown into vanished overnight. She moved on to other acting work and built a successful life. Yet, Lost in Space completely refused to fade from the cultural consciousness. Decades later, she reunited with Bill Mumy and Angela Cartwright for a massive archival project, curating hundreds of rare photographs from their time together. Seeing herself in that iconic silver costume again felt utterly surreal. Nearly 60 years had passed, yet the character of Judy Robinson still lived vibrantly in the public memory.